People are waiting to save their full deposit and then I'll speak to a broker, or waiting till they've found the perfect property. As we mentioned, that can limit your options and also lead to missed opportunities. So focusing on talking to a broker at the right time can actually open up them options. Hello, and welcome to First Home Unlocked, the podcast for unlocking clarity and confidence for first home buyers. I'm Jack Elliott, National First Home Buyer Specialist at Alcove.
And I'm Chris Bates, ex-financial planner and mortgage broker.
Together, we are on a mission to empower you with the keys to unlock your first home. Let's jump in. Hello, welcome back to First Home Unlocked. We're at episode 2 and step 2 of the buying process. So today we're going to talk about when is the right time to speak to a broker. Most people think it's after they've saved their full deposit or found the right property. But what we actually are talking about is how that can limit your options. Now, we're going to unpack starting early, how that puts you in control and the value a broker adds to your journey, and the timeline pre-purchase. So how are you today, Chris?
I'm absolutely loving doing these with you and having conversations around first home buyers and getting them ready to enter the market. It's such a stressful time. Super excited. And this is a big conversation today. Often a lot of people leave this way too late. They come to us and we think, oh, it would have been nice if you came 6-12 months ago. We could have fixed that. And time is money. And it's not all about you should just buy as soon as you can. But if you can potentially just put a plan in place and it gets you into the market, 12 months earlier or even 6 months earlier, that could be a big savings for you in terms of opportunity cost. So let's get stuck into it.
Thanks, Chris. And yeah, I think that's right. Focusing on talking to a broker at the right time can actually open up them options like you spoke about. So Chris, when do you think is a good time to speak to a broker?
I think ASAP, to be honest. I think, great brokers are more than happy just to have a bit of a chat. Some people have got very vanilla situations and there's nothing that you need to be concerned about. But some people have got some big plans. They want to go self-employed. They might have had issues with their credit. They might have a lot of pressure from family to buy, and even though they don't feel like it's right. So I don't think there's any time too early, but I think it's also trying to educate yourself on, along the journey as well.
Yeah, I agree. When you've had that conversation and you're thinking about property, I think the great next step is to talk to that broker as well, start learning. And I think that leads us into common misconceptions out there. And like I mentioned before, people are waiting to save their full deposit and then I'll speak to a broker, or waiting till they've found the perfect property. Now, as we mentioned, that can limit your options and also lead to missed opportunities. So I have an example of this. I was working with a self-employed first home buyer, and they were waiting until they'd saved their full deposit before reaching out to us. And then by the time we'd met, they'd just completed their tax returns for the last financial year. Now, this is a common practice, but what they did with their accountant is they maximized their deductions, which then reduced their tax payable. And what this did was it negatively impacted their borrowing power by reducing their net profit. Now, if they'd come to us 6 months earlier or even weeks earlier, we could have worked together with their accountant, and they could have gone away and created a plan to balance both their business tax and their income for their mortgage servicing. Now, by waiting, that limited their options, as you can see. And what this meant was they didn't meet the income requirements for most lenders. The key takeaway from this story is don't wait. Talk to your broker early and we can plan ahead and keep more doors open for you. And Chris, is this something that you encourage your clients to do, to come talk with us early to keep them doors open?
Yeah, because I think a great broker will just sit there and ask you some deep questions and some questions that you might not be able to answer straight away, but at least they'll poke that sort of thought in your mind, and you'll think, oh, maybe I shouldn't buy now. Maybe I should look to, I was thinking about buying an apartment in the city. Maybe I should just wait a little bit longer, and maybe I should ask work for that pay rise because, that extra 10 grand, I was chatting to a client yesterday, made a big difference to what she can buy. A first home buyer, an extra 50K. A borrowing capacity really opens up her options, which might come through in a couple of months. I mean, often we always ask clients, we do run a credit report on a client. And sometimes, there was a phone bill, or even there's been identity theft, and there could be credit issues that you just didn't even know you had. And sometimes those things take months to sort out. The big one is the deposit and, how banks look at bonuses and your commissions income and, whether you're a contractor, et cetera. A lot of people have a lot of misconceptions on when they can and can't borrow. They think they can't borrow on probation or on parental leave, etc. The deposit's always shifting because, there's always innovation with banks around things like lenders' mortgage insurance or guarantor loans. But at the moment in particular, there's a lot of first home buyer policies coming through with the election just happened as well. Incomes, and the policy starts on this date and it doesn't start on that date. And you may be eligible now, you might not be eligible in a couple of months, or you might be eligible in January. And so I think just having a really good understanding of how current government policies are also affecting you.
Yeah, and you're right, Chris. As you said, there's a lot of options out there. When you're thinking about purchasing, going and talking to a broker, at least that 6 to 12 months before you purchase. And I think what we can do now is break down why you would use a broker. Now, why it's a good option. Now, as you mentioned, there's heaps of different policies out there with banks, and we have over 40 lenders that we can compare. So it gives you options and we can align them policies to your personal situation and goals. All the banks have different policies, how they look at your income, LMI waivers for certain professions. We've got 1 year financials for self-employed clients. We've got casual and contract income and how banks service that differently. There's so many options that we can go through and talk through early in your journey to line that up with your purchase. We're able to compare and find the lender with the policy that suits your situation. We're not just looking at the best rate here. I think that's a big misconception. Yes, we can get you a good rate, but we're also looking at that policy that's going to align to your property purchase and help you buy based on your goals and your values. I've seen an example of this where we've matched a policy to a client's situation and it's made $100,000 in difference of two lenders that are giving them a loan. So you can see that there's a massive difference in what they're willing to offer just by looking at the policies a bit deeper. As a broker, we also handle all the admin, we negotiate the rates, we set up the right loan structure. So for example, using an offset, redraw account, using your deposit the best way that you can. And we represent you, not the lender, and we cost you nothing. So we are paid by the lender you choose at settlement. So there's a lot to dissect and go through as to what a good broker will do and why to use a broker. But what I really want you to take away from this is that we're more than just finding you the best rate. We're here to help you purchase your first home and help you strategically align that property purchase to your goals and values. So we're prepared, as you mentioned before, Chris, we're prepared to have these deeper conversations and get you to understand things you probably haven't considered and be on your team to help you feel clear, calm, and confident on that property journey. So Chris, do you think we've missed anything here as to why to use a broker?
Look, it's pretty comprehensive there, Jack. You've highlighted a lot of points, and it's not us trying to sell brokers versus the banks. I mean, the Australian public already voted with their feet. I mean, 76% of mortgages go through brokers now. I think for first home buyers, it's over 90%. I think the last time I looked, it was 92%, et cetera. So, 9 out of 10 first home buyers are going through brokers. The good thing for you as a customer is you don't have to pay often to use brokers. Some brokers may charge you a small fee. We don't for first home buyers. And brokers are remunerated from helping you over sometimes many years. I've had first home buyers who have come back and tried to get into the market. And finally, when they do purchase, we decide who's the best bank for them. Based on credit policy, you're right. Every bank's got different ways of looking at the income. Some banks will lend on some properties and some other properties. And even though you're pre-approved with one bank, it doesn't mean you're obligated to use them at all. Very often, I would say it's maybe 1 in 3, maybe even 1 in 2 clients who we're pre-approved with, we don't actually go ahead with. So yeah, using a broker is a bit of a no-brainer. You get the choice, you get clarity and confidence. But great brokers, before they even get to talking about rates and products, is actually just considering those different options with you. I'm just reflecting on a couple of first home buyers that we're working together with at the moment, Jack. And one, I spent a bit of time really helping them think through. She's buying by herself. What's right property for her? She's living in the city. Does she buy something a bit closer to her sister and her parents? Does she buy a 2-bed versus a 1-bed? Does she need parking? Does she not? And, and just really think that through. Does she get a flatmate? Does she buy it as an investment property? It's sort of that debate and that sounding board. And that was a similar conversation with another girl who's looking to do it herself yesterday as well. And we're really discussing, does she do it with her partner who's a bit fresh in the relationship? Do they do it together? And if they don't do it together, what could set them up for their sort of life going forward if they do stay together as a couple and want to buy something in the future? And for her, it might even make sense buying an investment property versus a home because she's got a much bigger deposit and she could potentially spend more. So yeah, that's what a great broker does because it's just so noisy out there. A lot of people putting pressure on you to buy your first home, friends, family, colleagues, the media, etc.
So we've discussed all the options that a broker can bring. And I think, Chris, what you mentioned was being that sounding board. They should be there to ask you the questions and bounce all the ideas that you have in your head and know what's actually going to happen, what plan you can make from there, from that conversation. Now, we've talked about why to use a broker and we've talked roughly about the timelines of when to see a broker. Now, I want to break this down in a bit more depth and go through what's involved at each step. So the first step is about that 6 to 12 months out from buying when you're thinking about purchasing a home. Now, what we do in this section is we want to review your finances and understand your whole position. This helps us also spot red flags early. So whether that's credit rating, looking at the income you're using as a self-employed client, like the example I shared before. And there's so many different things that we can look at. We want to help you build a strategy. So make a plan to save your deposit. That can be a big journey and it's a lot to get your head around, but we're here to help you make a plan to save that. We also want to help manage your debt strategically. An example of this is if you had a $20,000 credit card, reducing that limit, that's going to increase your borrowing capacity. With my first home buyer clients is why they're saving is simulating their mortgage repayments. So by putting away the estimated amount into your savings account, it just starts that habit of when you actually do get the mortgage. So the main point here is the earlier you start, the more options that you have and the more control that you have. Now, Chris, do you want to talk through the next stage of what we're covering and what we're doing about 3 to 4 months out from purchasing?
Look, I think it's when you're really starting to do some scenario analysis, you're really deciding on who's probably the best person to get pre-approval through. Do you want to just talk through the pre-approval process, Jack? You're probably more across it nowadays than I am.
Yeah, so the pre-approval process. So I'll start with what actually is a pre-approval. Now, a pre-approval is just a confirmation from a bank or lender that they're willing to lend a certain amount based on your situation. Now, what this does is it gives you the confidence in putting in offers because you know already how much you can spend. Now, pre-approvals usually last for 90 days and we can extend them as well. So if you don't find a property in that first 3 months, we can go back to that lender, extend that, and we'll also look at all different lender options when you go to extending that pre-approval and making sure that they are still the best lender. Now, I'll go into more depth in an upcoming episode about pre-approval and the process and how it all works, but that's a bit of a high level understanding of what a pre-approval is. Now, also at this stage, we're taking that action. So as you mentioned, Chris, we're getting pre-approval organized. You're starting to look at properties now. Also, another aspect to consider, especially with first home buyers, is finalizing that deposit. So we want that deposit finalized to meet that lender requirement. Now, for example, if you're using the first home guarantee scheme, you need to have that deposit sitting in your bank account for at least 1 month to show that genuine savings. Now, the first home guarantee scheme, there's a lot to it. We will go into that in a future episode, how that works, the eligibility and stuff. But what we want to just signify here is when you're getting that pre-approval, we want your deposit organized and settled so you're ready to go. And we're kind of moving into the action stage. We've done all the planning. We've looked at your strategy. We've picked the lender. It's now time to take that action. And Chris, do you think there's anything that I've missed here when we're in this stage, kind of that pre-approval stage, taking action, finalizing that deposit?
Look, I think often people will just avoid doing it. They worry about it's going to really affect their credit file, getting lodging something on their getting a pre-approval. I think great brokers don't have a mud on the wall approach. In fairness, when I was back in my early days, I was figuring it all out. I didn't know what I didn't know, and my decline rate was a lot higher than it is today. We very, very, very rarely get a decline loan now. We just have the expertise in house to know that if something's going to get approved or not, and we don't sort of half lodge applications, which unfortunately are not a new to industry brokers, just have to go through those lessons where, you do everything you can to make sure that this loan gets approved and you do the checks up front. So if we are lodging a pre-approval, 99.9% chance it's going to get approved. But sometimes just getting that pre-approval gives buyers a lot of confidence. You know what? Because there's just this fear that sometimes people, maybe I'm not eligible or maybe I'm not, it's kind of like it's a belief sometimes they've got. And just getting that proof and gives them the confidence to go, you know what, now I can actually make this dream turn into a reality. And we don't actually mind sometimes just helping clients build that confidence, getting them pre-approved, getting them into position to buy. Now, sometimes there's no cost to them. There is a bit of a cost to us to invest in actually making sure, in terms of time to make it happen. Often it's better because once you've got that confidence there and then you're in the market and you're going to open homes, something that you thought might not happen actually may happen because you're out there looking and you're pre-approved. Yeah, get in early, get pre-approved, understand the process, figure out, there's a little bit of work up front, but you get a lot of rewards by just experience the process, particularly the first time.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Chris, on that confidence piece. I can only imagine, and I've spoke to many first home buyers, that getting that finance sorted before you're going out and looking at inspections, there's already a lot of emotion involved, trying to pick the right house, looking at different house options, looking in suburbs. There's a lot to consider. So I think getting that finance approval, that pre-approval sorted, just helps take one bit of pressure off you. And as you said, we can have them deeper conversations, find out their goals, work out the best policy to match to that client rather than rate, and then make that a smoother, easier process and talk through that. Your broker should be talking you through the pre-approval process, why we're going to this lender, comparing other lenders for you, and explaining that in detail too. So okay, this is why we're getting pre-approved with this bank. And then you can have that confidence to then go out and shop knowing exactly how much you can spend. And you can focus on the inspections and the other things to consider when buying your first home rather than thinking, oh, I love this property, but can I afford it? It takes that guesswork out of it.
Absolutely. I'll double down on that, Jack. The amount of times I've seen over the years where clients haven't been pre-approved, but they're really keen on a property. They want to move fast and they're focusing on pre-approval and the bank and the rate and the structure. And the most important thing is actually the property. Yes, the loan and who you use and the rate matters, but the most important thing is the asset you actually buy. And what happens is they just get overwhelmed with everything and the easier things to sort the finance out in their mind. And they just sort of rush the property purchase, which is a big, big mistake. And so get the finance sorted, put it in the bottom drawer, it's there, ready to go, and focus all your energy on actually making sure you get a good asset that suits your life and will actually work for you. So that's a good episode, Jack. I look forward to episode 3. What are we covering in that one?
Yeah, so episode 3, we're going to go into step 3 of the buying process, and we're actually going to break down what's involved in the costs for buying your first home. So what charges are there? What fees are there? Because it's not just the property price and the deposit. There's also other fees like stamp duty, etc., that come into it. So I'm looking forward to breaking that down with you in the next episode and look forward to seeing you all there.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for listening. We'd really appreciate if you could do us a huge favor. Share this episode with any first home buyers that you know so we can help more people like you feel clear, calm and confident when purchasing their first property. You can join our Facebook group, First Home Unlocked, to continue the conversation with other first home buyers. Or if you're ready to unlock your first home, you can book a get to know you chat by using the link in the show notes or by going to firsthomeunlocked.com.au. Before we go, just a reminder that everything we share on this podcast is general in nature and not tailored to your personal situation. We always recommend seeking advice from a qualified and experienced professional when making financial decisions.